And I'm Rick Kegwin. I'm the Director of the Pesticide Reevaluation Division at the Environmental Protection Agency. Thank you all for attending, and those of you on the phone for joining us as well.
Okay, so this is Melinda, and again, Rick and I co-chair at the staff level some of the work done to implement the President's memo on pollinator health and the staff task force that's working to do some of that. This is the second of 2 listening sessions being held, and we thought we would work through the slide deck that is up on the screen behind me for those in the room and that everyone online should be able to access through the webinar. To go ahead and get started, as everyone knows, back in June, President Obama issued a memorandum that created a President task force on this and called on federal agencies to increase and improve coordination of their efforts to improve bee health. Generally speaking, the memo is broken down into 3 sections. The first is the creation of a task force. The second is the mission of that task force. And the third are the actions to increase and improve pollinator habitat. So to talk a bit more about the task force itself. Sorry, can we go ahead and... Okay. Can we get 2 slides ahead? Perfect, thank you. So the first section is the task force, and as you'll see on the slide, there are a lot of different federal departments and agencies involved. This slide is by no means comprehensive. As we started to work on the task force, other folks kind of came up and said they were interested or they had a role to play, an example being the Smithsonian, which is listed on the slide, was not actually mentioned in the task force originally, but has been a key partner as we've worked to implement the memo. Next slide, please. Okay. The second section talks a bit about the mission and function of the task force. The first component being the research action plan that the task force is charged with creating. That research action plan is to include studies of factors that affect the health of managed and native bees, data and technology sharing to track the status and trends in managed hives, assessments of native pollinators and modeling their habitats, strategies and guidance for affordable pollinator-friendly seed mixes, methods to reduce exposure to pesticides, and prioritizing projects for habitat restoration. Next slide, please. The next component of the mission and function of the task force is the public education plan. That is to include steps that individuals and businesses can take to address the loss of pollinators and recommendations for coordinated education campaigns on the issue. The third component of the mission and function is public-private partnerships. Those partnerships should encourage the protection of pollinators and work to increase the quality and quantity of habitat available for pollinators. The next section of the June President's memo focused on improving and increasing pollinator habitat. That includes quite a few components, starting with enhancing habitat on federal lands and facilities, enhancing the habitat on rights-of-way and land easements, incorporating pollinator health in future federal restoration and reclamation projects, revising federal guidance on facilities management to improve pollinator habitat, developing best management practices for public lands, establishing a reserve of pollinator-friendly seed mixes for revegetation projects, and increasing the acreage and forage value of pollinator habitat in federal conservation programs, as well as providing technical assistance to landowners on pollinator-friendly practices. It also includes assisting states and state wildlife organizations in identifying and implementing pollinator conservation projects, increasing pollinator habitats along federal and state roadways, increasing pollinator habitat on military property, increasing pollinator habitat on land and water resource development projects, assessing the effects of pesticides on pollinators, and expediting the review of new products targeting pests to pollinators, and taking immediate action to support pollinators and pollinator habitat in the 2014 growing season and each growing season thereafter. So, taking a step back and talking a bit about the timeline, the presidential memo was issued on June 20th of this year. Beginning shortly thereafter, monthly meeting of agency principals and biweekly meetings of agency points of contact, including Rick and I, began, and they continue to go. And in October, CEQ and GSA issued the guidance that we just talked about in one of the earlier slides around facilities. And in November, we are hosting 2 stakeholder listening sessions. The first was held at an EPA facility on November 12th, and the second is being held here at a USDA facility in Riverdale on November 17th. We are moving forward to deliver the final draft of the education and research plans and best management practices to the White House by December 20th, which is the timeline that was laid out in the June 20th presidential memo. And then early next year, looking at the public rollout of task force products, likely in late winter or early spring. To talk a little bit about the progress to date, the first component would be federal facility and land guidance. And again, in October, the CEQ, which is the Council on Environmental Quality, released an addendum to ENS's guidance for federal agencies on sustainable practices for design landscapes. And that addendum is intended to promote pollinator habitat creation and maintenance. Also in October, the General Services Administration prepared and is implementing pollinator habitat guidance related to federal building construction. That guidance will be published in the general update of the GSA P100 standard. An additional example of progress to date, and also in October, the USDA hosted a Bee Forage and Nutrition Summit. Day 1 included presentations, and Day 2 included presentations and working groups. Attendees included beekeepers, commodity groups, retailers, professional societies, agrochemical companies, NGOs, federal and state representatives. Next slide, please. Okay, so why a listening session? We all know that pollinators are important players in natural and managed ecosystems on public and private lands. Pollinator habitat spans public and private lands. Private and public research may be complementary in addressing pollinator health, and private entities have a nationwide diverse stakeholder network with the capacity to deliver information locally. So the goals for this listening session today, we would like to solicit feedback on best management practices, pesticide risk mitigation, research, education opportunities, pollinator habitat improvements, and public-private partnerships. And to emphasize the importance of partnerships, what we're especially interested in hearing about is how can the federal government catalyze and coordinate partnerships for pollinator health? What types of existing partnerships are out there already? What is their function? How large is their impact? And can they be scaled up or down? What has made existing partnerships successful and what has been challenging? And what other partnerships would you find helpful? So the format for today, please wait to be called on by the facilitator. That would be me this time. Please use the microphone for folks in the room. Please limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes at a time. And if possible, we ask that you also submit your comments in written form as well. Comments may be submitted online through COB November 24th. And to find the route to do this online, please go to www.regulations.gov, and it is EPA docket number EPA-HQ-OPP-2014-0806. Learning from our first listening session, we have placed a global mute for folks who are joining us by webinar. The operator will help you unmute your line when we call on folks who registered to speak in advance, and then we will also be monitoring webinar participants kind of in live time to add you to the speaker queue. And again, when it is your turn and when we ask that you go ahead and speak up, the operator will work with you so that you are able to get out of mute, but hopefully that will help with the sound feedback issues that we had at the last listening session. Okay. So to start with, we have Richard, who is an entomologist from All Florida Bee Removal, and he is participating via the webinar and asked to speak. Richard, are you with us? So it's Richard Martiniak.
Richard Martin, please press *1 on your telephone keypad. I'm not showing that he's on the call.
Okay, moving on, we have Peter Jenkins from the Center for Food Safety.
Peter Jenkins, please press star 1 on your telephone keypad in order to open up your line.
Operator, Peter is with us in the room. Thank you.
Where do you want me? Is it right there? Okay, you sure? Thank you very much for the opportunity. And with the Center for Food Safety, the focus will be on reducing pesticide use and public education opportunities. USDA is critical in the implementation of integrated pest management, yet we know that prophylactic use of coated seeds, typically in the absence of pest pressure, directly contradicts accepted IPM principles. You need to reverse your public education approach and point out to all the users of your important public information education materials on the website, printed and so on, that prophylactic use of neonic-coated seeds violates IPM principles and should be minimized. Similarly, it's been established by EPA and by studies issued by my own organization, Center for Food Safety, that neonic-coated seeds in many cases are used unnecessarily. They're not efficacious, some cases even causing decreases in yields. So USDA needs to advise farmers about the risks of using coated seeds, with the impact on their yields being very uncertain at best, particularly given the harms that they cause. Then, as far as developing public-private partnerships and creating habitat, very important point. Obviously, we all want to see more pollinator-friendly habitat, but we also don't want to see population sinks for pollinators created through this habitat. If the habitat is contaminated, whether through dust or the soils or the waters, with these neonic insecticides, the habitat created is not going to be of any value. So we need to make sure that the habitat is good, clean habitat and not treated with insecticides. And perhaps most importantly, in view of some new findings, that the water is not contaminated in these habitat areas. There's just a tremendous amount of new information coming out about neonic contaminated waters, including a very important review paper that I really hope you put into the record and take very seriously. It just was published yesterday, as I understand it, in Environment International by Christy Morrissey et al. The title is Neonicotinoid Contamination of Global Surface Waters and Associated Risk to Aquatic Invertebrates, a review. And it's a detailed global review of studies worldwide showing that right now, because of existing neonic contamination, in many cases, the reference levels, the safety levels for aquatic invertebrates have been exceeded already. So we can't continue down this path. We try not to be alarmist about these compounds, but this is really the leading edge of a second Silent Spring situation where waters worldwide are being sanitized by these insecticides. So it's very important as you're developing habitat and thinking about the role of USDA that you recognize the existing contamination, take into account all the very best new information. I will just finish by reading the last line from the abstract of that paper. They say, it appears that environmentally relevant concentrations of neonicotinoids in surface waters worldwide are well within the range where both short and long-term impacts on aquatic invertebrate species are possible over broad spatial scales. So clearly we need aquatic inverts, we need pollinators, we need birds, and all the food chain species that are associated with those waters. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Next, we've got Julie Shapiro of the Keystone Center on behalf of the Honeybee Health Coalition, who is also with us in the room today.
Okay, thanks. Again, my name is Julie Shapiro. I'm a senior associate at the Keystone Center, and I'm the facilitator of the Honeybee Health Coalition. On behalf of the coalition, I want to thank the president for his vision and the task force for its work, and for the chance to provide input, especially around public-private partnerships. The coalition is one of the largest and most diverse public-private partnerships already working to address honeybee health, and we welcome the opportunity to work with the task force going forward. The coalition brings together more than 30 organizations in the United States and Canada, including beekeepers, crop producers, agribusinesses, environmentalists, researchers, state and federal agencies, and more. We see honeybee health as a multi-factor problem with no single silver bullet solution. The Coalition would like to emphasize the importance of collaboration across diverse stakeholders to address all of the major factors influencing pollinator health. Last month, the Coalition released its Be Healthy Roadmap, identifying 4 top priorities: hive management, including varroa mite control, forage and nutrition, crop pest control, and stakeholder communication and collaboration. We offer the roadmap as a template that others can build upon with the Coalition or on their own, and it is this collaboratively identified science-based roadmap that forms the basis of the Coalition's recommendations for the National Pollinator Health Strategy. So the recommendations for the task force and for the strategy include, number 1, hive management and varroa control, support efforts of technology transfer teams and other state and federal extension programs for beekeepers, and accelerate identification and registration of tools and products to effectively control varroa destructor mites. Number 2, forage and nutrition. The Coalition would like to see an increase in the acreage and nutritional value of forage plantings in the USDA's conservation programs that are specific to honeybees, including the CRP program. And they'd like to see that adopt stakeholder-informed seed specifications and technical guidelines that encourage planting more affordable, varied forage for honeybees. The Coalition would also like to see support for public-private demonstration projects that show and quantify the agronomic, economic, and ecosystem service co-benefits of honeybee forage for a variety of stakeholders. We need to build the win-win business case for bee forage on private lands. The Coalition would also like to see increases in forage opportunities and nutritional value of forage for honeybees on other private and public lands, and support for research and development for nutritional supplements to support commercial honeybees when forage is lacking. Within crop pest control, the Coalition would like to see support for state-based and other programs for bringing together beekeepers, crop producers, and other stakeholders in the discussion and implementation of best management practices. As well as encouragement for state and other programs for pesticide applicators and other stakeholders to provide continuing education credits for trainings. We'd also like to see work through the appropriate agencies and stakeholders to improve incident reporting mechanism and incident reporting data. Finally, within collaboration and communication, the task force's public education campaign should create awareness of the multiple factors that impact honeybee health, the need to improve bee health through a diversity of approaches, the essential need for public-private collaboration, and the message that beekeepers and farmers are part of one agricultural system supporting global food security. The National Pollinator Health Strategy should promote collaborative public-private partnerships to find solutions for all stakeholders and that can achieve more than any one stakeholder can achieve on its own. Thank you again for the opportunity, and the Coalition again welcomes the opportunity for future collaboration.
Thank you, Julie. Next, we have Richard Wilkins, who is a farmer in Delaware and who is with us in the room today.
Good afternoon. I appreciate the opportunity to present at this listening session. As introduced, I'm a farmer from Greenwood, Delaware, very diversified operation. On our farm, we grow corn, soybeans, winter wheat, winter barley, green peas, lima beans, string beans, sweet corn, alfalfa, and many other forage crops. You know, today's farmer, when we put the seed in the ground, that seed, the plant is never going to perform any better, be any more productive than what the strength of that seed can be. And today we've got a tremendous amount of genetic potential, genetic productivity that's been developed. The hybrids and varieties that we are planting today have the greatest amount of productive germplasm that's attainable. On our farm, just like many other farms across the country, especially here in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, we've overwhelmingly adopted soil conservation practices, minimum tillage, continuous no-till, whereby we're leaving a mulch of residue on the surface and not disturbing the soil before we plant the seed into it. We employ precision planting methods. What we try to attain is an extremely uniform stand density. We need each seed to be coming up with the proper amount of distance between each plant. If you have your plants too close together, then your plants are competing against each other rather than competing against nature. This also allows us to make more efficient use of water and nutrients. Other practices that most farmers have adopted is earlier planting. Earlier planting allows us to utilize more growing degree days in order to increase the amount of production that we're coming up with. And really what a plant is doing, a plant is a solar receptor. So the other thing that we're doing is we're taking this abundant solar energy and carbon dioxide, and we're turning that into stored energy, carbohydrates, protein, and vitamins. And at the same time, we're sequestering the excess carbon in the soil as we're growing these crops. Now, these things that we've adopted, the soil conservation practices, the earlier planting, makes our crops much more susceptible to soil-borne pests. In the earlier days when I first began farming, we were using organophosphate and carbonate types of pesticides. We were putting these, dribbling these or banding them over top of our seed trenches. And the downside of that is, in addition to protecting our seeds and our seedlings against the soil-borne pests, we were also harming the beneficial worms and bacteria and the beneficial insects in the soil that we really wanted to thrive. So along came a great class of chemistry called neonicotinoids. I'm going to continue to say neonics in my presentation. This great class of chemistry, it's less harmful to those beneficial insects that we want to maintain and thrive. Requires higher doses to be lethal on mammals and birds. However, at the same time, lower doses can protect our seeds and our seedlings against those pests that we're trying to battle against. Along with the development of the neonic class of chemistry came along with the developments of polymers that could be used to coat the seeds. And just imagine that when we went to using these seed coatings, insecticide and fungicide coated seeds, the pounds of active ingredients that we use are less than a third of what we were using previously. We're treating instead of broadly treating the entire soil seed trench, we're only treating that small area right around the seed, so that the areas between the seeds where we want the earthworms and the bacteria to thrive are not affected by the chemistry. Some of the pests that we are affected by with crops that we grow are wireworms, bean leaf beetles, seed corn maggots, nematodes, aphids, thrips, grubs, and potato leafhoppers. And the neonic class of chemistries are very effective against those pests. If we lose the use of this important class of chemistry, we'd have to return to the usage of the older classes of pesticides. We'd have to apply more pounds of active ingredient, and we'd have less effective pesticides. Now, on the Delmarva Peninsula where I farm at, we also have a huge number of acres of cucurbit crops such as watermelons, pumpkins, cantaloupes, cucumbers. Those crops are extremely important on pollinators. A friend of mine that grows watermelons tells me that a honeybee has to visit a watermelon blossom 7 times in order to effectively pollinate that blossom. But our farmers we're not seeing problems with colony collapse disorder. We also have a lot of native pollinators on the Delmarva Peninsula too. On the adverse, they tell me that a bumblebee only has to visit a watermelon blossom 1 or 2 times to effectively pollinate that. So, in closing, I'd just like to say that When applied in safe and smart ways, pesticides can lead to extremely more sustainable agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkins. Next, we have Ms. Abernathy, the Integrated Pest Management Coordinator for the City of Boulder, who I believe is with us in the room. Great. Hold on just a second to get the microphone, please.
So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Rella Abernathy, and I'm the Integrated Pest Management Coordinator for the City of Boulder, Colorado. Boulder is located at the foot of the Rocky Mountains and has a population of 100,000. Like other cities, Boulder has urban parks, ball fields, and other public recreational spaces. The city also manages 16 creek corridors that run through town, as well as over 45,000 acres of open space land, which range from mountain parks, wetlands, prairies, and grasslands to agricultural properties that are leased to farmers and ranchers. Our community takes its responsibility as environmental stewards very seriously. The city's first IPM policy was adopted in 1993 with the goal of eliminating and reducing reliance on chemical pest controls on public property. The city also takes great pride in the preservation and restoration of city-owned lands and the protection of the biodiversity of the plants and animals that live on these properties. Within the urban environment, the city relies mainly on non-chemical approaches to avoid pesticide exposure to people, particularly vulnerable populations like children, and to prevent runoff of damaging chemicals into the creeks and waterways. But like most other states, Colorado has a law that prevents local governments from enacting or enforcing more stringent restrictions on the application of pesticides. While the prophylactic use of systemic insecticides in agricultural settings is a threat to pollinators, including those on city land, I will focus my comments on the harm that widespread use of one group of systemic insecticides, the neonicotinoids, presents to pollinators and other animals in the urban setting. Neonicotinoid insecticides, such as imidacloprid, are commonly used on lawns, sprayed and injected into trees, and poured onto the soil of flower beds as drenches in granular formulations, and sprayed onto vegetable gardens. Some products are applied by professional landscaping companies and licensed pesticide applicators, and others are applied by homeowners. The EPA has placed limits on the amount of the most commonly used neonicotinoid, imidacloprid, that can be applied per acre in all settings, both agricultural and urban. But unlike agricultural settings where the rate that's been applied is known, there is no mechanism in place to track urban applications. In addition, products used in urban settings are allowed to be used at much higher rates than agricultural applications. For example, the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation calculated the amount of imidacloprid that could be applied to an apple tree in agriculture compared to backyard settings. For large trees, the allowed rate can be up to 120 times greater than the agricultural rate. In woody plants, neonicotinoids can persist for years and harm pollinators. The urban setting has the potential for multiple neonicotinoid applications by multiple users to occur, and no one is tracking the amount to ensure that it complies with the law. In many cases, the limits per acre are likely exceeded. And unlike the labels on agricultural products, the labels on neonicotinoid products that are carried in garden centers and big box stores across the nation say nothing about their toxicity to pollinators, earthworms, and other animals. On some labels, users are directed to apply the product to flower beds every 6 weeks, even though these products can last for months, even years in soils and build up with repeated use. People bring bee-friendly plants into their yards to attract pollinators and help them, but then unwittingly apply products that harm pollinators due to crucial information being absent on these labels. Pollinators and animals move between the urban and natural environments, and many urban areas are toxic for pollinators, soil organisms, birds, and other animals. Runoff from urban application of neonicotinoids contaminates ground and surface water and kills aquatic organisms. Because laws in Colorado and most other states do not address these concerns and prevent local governments from adopting more stringent ordinances to do so, we need federal government assistance to address these pesticide-related issues. By placing restrictions on the use of neonicotinoids for cosmetic applications in the urban environment, by eliminating the uses on neonicotinoid labels for application directly to flower beds, turf grass, and ornamental plants, including bushes and trees, requiring that all bee toxic consumer products, particularly systemic insecticides, state clearly on the label that toxicity to bees, beneficial insects, and other non-target organisms, as well as their persistence throughout all plant tissues and in soils. And lastly, evaluating the possibility of designating all neonicotinoid insecticides as a restricted use pesticide that may only be applied by a licensed pesticide applicator. Thank you for your consideration of these comments.
Thank you, Ms. Abernathy. Just a reminder for folks, we'd ask that you stick to 3 minutes. We've now had a couple who've gone over. We have 19 additional folks who have requested to speak already, and then we would like to make sure that there's still time to open up for comments from other folks, and it is 1:37, and our target end time is 3 p.m. So next we have Mr. Ray Acer from Corning, Iowa, who I believe is participating on the webinar. Operator, just to check in, I believe that this participant is participating via the webinar and may need assistance unmuting his line.
Please press star 1 on your telephone keypad in order for me to unmute your line. That is star 1.
Okay, it seems...
Your line is open. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, so my name is Ray Gasser. My family and I grow soybeans and corn in southwest Iowa. A longtime farmer there, and I just wanted to comment about the value of the neonicotinoids seed treatments on our farm, specifically for soybeans, but we also use them in our corn products too. But for soybeans, we have soybean leaf beetles that we've had a problem with on our farm since 1994. And before neonic seed treatments, we had to spray them every year. And that best management practice for us was to spray just after the soybeans emerged to control the overwintering bean leaf beetles. So that was an over-top application. But since we've been using neonics on our seed treatments, we've eliminated that over-the-top application. And I think that on our farm, it really management practice, and I think it would be very unfortunate to look at the averages of seed treatments for soybeans and say, well, we should ban neonics, because I think for many of our farms in the United States, we're finding that there is value for neonic seed treatments, and I really would recommend that it be available to farmers. I do agree that we need further research. I do believe we need further farmer educations, and we need to make sure that we all use best management practices and integrated pest management practices to judiciously use these neonics and make sure that they're effective for us in the future. So I would just recommend to you that you not totally ban neonic seed treatments for soybeans, because they are effective, on our farm, and I think many farms in the United States. Really, thank you for the opportunity to comment, and I'll turn it over to the next person.
Great. Thank you for joining us today. Next is Jennifer Sass from the National Resource Defense Council, who is with us in the room today.
Hi. So Sylvia and I are both from Natural Resource Defense Council scientists, and we signed up together. Do you mind if we just do our comments right now? Is that okay?
My name is Sylvia Fallon. I'm a scientist with the Natural Resources Defense Council. As is evident from the President's call for a Pollinator Task Force, the pollinators in our country are facing a serious crisis.
The iconic monarch butterflies that migrate across the United States each year are in rapid decline. And research indicates that this decline is largely due to the severe loss of milkweed plants from the accelerated use of glyphosate in connection with glyphosate-resistant crops. We support any efforts that the task force is taking to promote the planting of milkweed. However, as the two agencies are in charge of regulating both genetically modified crops and the pesticides associated with them, the USDA and the EPA have an obligation to review the approval of glyphosate in light of its effect on monarch butterflies. Our organization, NRDC, filed a petition with EPA earlier this year asking you to review glyphosate and impose restrictions on its use in order to mitigate the damage it is doing to the monarch butterfly. So far, the EPA has not issued a response to this petition. And today we are submitting the signatures of over 140,000 of our NRDC members and activists, some of whom are here with us today, who care deeply about this issue and who urge the EPA to act now on our petition and do its part to protect the environment, including the natural wonder of the monarch migration. In addition, your two organizations recently approved a new crop and pesticide combination, Enlist Duo, which will continue to contribute to the decline of milkweed. For other weeds, however, Enlist Duo will result in more weed resistance, leading to even more pesticide use. This never-ending cycle of increasingly more harmful pesticides poses a risk to the environment, to pollinators, and to public health. And for all these reasons, it's imperative that the USDA and EPA break the cycle of herbicide-resistant crop approval.
I'm Jennifer Sass, scientist with NRDC. And while there are a number of factors contributing to the dramatic die-off of bees, both honeybees and native bees, there is now a wealth of science that demonstrates that pesticides are a big part of the problem. In particular, the increasing use of a class of highly bee-toxic neonicotinoid pesticides are linked to impaired bee health, making it more difficult for the colony to breed, to fight off diseases and pathogens, and to survive winter. What makes neonics so harmful to bees is that they are systemic, meaning they are poisoning the whole plant, treated plant, including the nectar and pollen that bees eat, and they are persistent, lasting months or even years in the plant, soil, and waterways. Traditional best management practices, therefore, for bee protection, such as not spraying during the day or on bloom, doesn't work for neonics. For these reasons, NRDC also submitted a petition to EPA this summer asking for an immediate review of neonics. Today, we are submitting the signatures of nearly 275,000 NRDC members who urge you to respond to our petition immediately. Ultimately, we believe that most uses of neonics need to be canceled altogether, but there are a number of actions that EPA could take now, including imposing restrictions on the use of neonics as seed treatments and on bee-attractive ornamental plants. The EPA should act immediately to impose restrictions on the use of neonics. In summary, there are a whole host of actions that EPA and USD should take to help pollinators. Most importantly, we urge you to scale back the use of glyphosate and other herbicides, reject new applications for herbicide-resistant crops, restrict the use of neonics, and support alternatives to broad-scale prophylactic use of persistent pesticides. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments.
Thank you both. Next, we have Beth Conroy of the Colorado Beekeepers, who I believe is participating via the webinar and may need, never mind, in the room. Sure. Beth Conroy of the Colorado Beekeepers.
Thank you. I'm going to sit down so I can read my phone. Thank you to the USDA and the EPA for conducting these listening sessions. My name is Beth Conroy. I am president of the Colorado State Beekeepers Association, and I am here representing both the CSBA as well as myself and my bee business. This year, honey production was dramatically diminished throughout our state. As with all things beekeeping, there are many theories on why this is, but the bottom line is that there is no honey when there is no nectar. Nectar is produced by blooming plants and there are simply not enough of them. Bees and all other pollinating insects need clean, safe forage. First, I would like to talk about clean and safe. Clean and safe forage is defined as pesticide-free. In the case of forage, this would be free of both herbicides and insecticides. The precipitous decline of the monarch butterfly is directly related to the rampant use of broad-spectrum herbicides, in particular glyphosate. We as a society need to reduce our dependence on these products. Insecticide use, especially neonicotinoids as prophylactic seed coatings, must also be reduced or eliminated. There are several arguments that have been put forth justifying the continued registration and allowable use of these pesticides. The first is that they are necessary to ensure maximum crop production. As EPA's own recently issued report on soybean production indicates, this argument is specious. When did the idea that ensuring the health of bees and other pollinating insects become unsound agricultural practice? When did bees, essential to agriculture, become the collateral damage of it? And when did beekeepers become the enemy of the farmer? For heaven's sake, bees are agriculture, just a humming little division of it. Beekeepers are farmers. We do not have to give up crop production to have bee protection. We can have both. Second, it is argued that they are less toxic than previous generations of pesticides. While it is claimed that human health may be less impacted by these products than the ones that came before them, there is ample peer-reviewed evidence of environmental problems occurring at incredibly low concentrations within populations of aquatic insects, earthworms, bees, and other terrestrials, to name just a few. These animals comprise the base of the food pyramid. If they are unhealthy, so are the animals that eat them. As the animal at the top of the food pyramid, I am less and less confident that these pesticides are less toxic than their predecessors. Third, the argument is made if they are removed from the market, then agriculture will need to return to organophosphates and other older, more toxic to human pesticides to control crop pests. At the risk of being struck by a bolt of lightning, I say bring it on. At least when my bees are exposed to the improper application of this class of insecticides, I had a pile of dead bees that I could point to, and I knew exactly what had happened. Not only that, they were not nearly as persistent. Now I have bees that die in the spring, they die in the summer, they die in the fall, they die in the winter. I have hives with young queens that die, hives with old queens that die. I have hives in town that die, I have hives in the country that die. I have hives with lots of mites that die, I have hives with few mites that die. And yet, nearly every one of them now is a quote-unquote mystery. There are those that will say I suffer from an ailment known as PPB, piss-poor beekeeping. I beg to differ. I am a conscientious and informed beekeeper, and my results no longer reflect my efforts. In addition, data suggests that non-managed solitary bees are experiencing these same declines, and I am not practicing my PPB on them. Next, I would like to talk about forage. Forage is bee food. Forage has been compromised in the U.S. by several practices. Overuse of herbicides around herbicide-resistant crops has turned our agricultural areas into a virtual forage desert. Edge-to-edge planting has further decreased available food sources. Noxious weed programs have compromised forage along most road systems. Large hardware stores are allowed to sell neonicotinoid-treated plants as quote-unquote bee-friendly.
Ms. Conroy?
Yes,
Sorry.
are we out of time?
Do you mind wrapping up momentarily?
I am.
Giving you an extra 2 minutes. Thank you.
Correct. Opportunities abound within the presidential memorandum for federal government agencies and programs to encourage and provide clean, safe forage, as well as to address other glaring gaps in data. The plan is comprehensive and if properly administered in a timely fashion will provide a positive impact on pollinator health and habitat. CSBA is ready and willing to assist in all appropriate aspects of the federal strategy implementation. Thank you.
Okay, next is Dr. Pete Nowak from Ag Informatics, LLC, and I believe he may be on the webinar. Operator, he may need assistance freeing his line.
Please press star one in order for me to open your line on your telephone keypad. Again, that's star one. And your line is open. You may go ahead. Your line is open.
Excuse me?
Dr. Nowak, are you on the line?
His line dropped out. One moment.
Okay.
Again, sir, please press star one on your telephone keypad. And he hasn't come back into the queue.
Okay, operator, if he rejoins, please let Dr. Nowak know that we will add him down. We currently have...
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Next, we have Dr. Ray McAllister here with us from CropLife America.
My name is Ray McAllister. I'm the Senior Director of Regulatory Policy for CropLife America, which is the National Trade Association for the crop protection industry. Our member companies develop, manufacture, and market virtually all of the crop protection products used in American agriculture. I'm very proud to work and the products and the stewardship of our organization and its members. In the public's eye, pollinator health has been strongly linked with seed treatment. The treatment of seeds with crop protection chemicals is the safest and most efficient way of addressing a host of pest and disease problems. Protection is achieved by precise placement of the minimum amount of product to do the job with minimum exposure to non-target organisms and to the farmers. The alternatives to seed treatment typically involve multiple soil and foliar applications of a larger quantity of the product to much larger areas. These compounds may be more toxic, and they may need to be applied at times when exposure to pollinators and other non-target organisms is more likely. Much is made of systemic insecticide treatments and the potential for pollinator exposure through pollen and nectar. But the small amount of product needed to provide pest protection to the seed and the very early season application assure that exposure to pollinators is reduced well below levels of concern by the time bees are foraging for pollen and nectar. Our CropLife Foundation has prepared an extensive report on the benefits of seed treatment, including how they reduce risks, which we will submit to the docket for these listening sessions. The CropLife America and the American Seed Trade Association have developed a comprehensive seed treatment stewardship program for both the facilities that treat the seed and the farmers who plant them. This stewardship effort is supported also by the National Corn Growers Association, the American Soybean Association, and the American Farm Bureau. The seed must be treated with a combination of products and the seed must be treated with a combination of products and polymers that will ensure that the products are available when needed during the germination process without impeding germination or the early growth of the crop. This stewardship program emphasizes the quality of the seed treatment process to make certain that the treatment adheres to the seed until that seed is planted. It also emphasizes proper operation of planting equipment and the use of seed lubricants in the planters to minimize dust off from seed in the field. As rapidly as practically possible, innovations and improvements in planter design and the lubricant technology are incorporated into the stewardship process. We will be sharing details of the efforts to date and the plans for the future with the docket for these listening sessions. And Jane DeMarchi from the ASTA is here with some additional information. The CLA member companies have a strong concentration of entomology expertise needed to understand the health of pollinators, to evaluate the hazards from all sources, and to explore, develop, and implement solutions. Several CLA members are investing substantial resources directly in pollinator health, improvements in nutrition, protection against diseases, virus, pests, and parasites. These companies are partnering with government regulatory agencies, public and private research efforts, and beekeepers to develop and bring to market innovative products and strategies. Among the more exciting concepts are RNAi technology, precision application of mite control products to the individual bees, and new chemistry. From across the spectrum of organizations, interests, and individuals who feel passionately about the welfare of pollinators, it's easy to find much to disagree on. Honey, honeybees, pollinators, and pollination are vital elements of the larger agricultural picture. So likewise is crop protection. We can accomplish far more via a civil dialogue to find out where we can agree and how we can resolve the differences and problems than with shrill arguments and accusations. If any of you have additional constructive suggestions how the crop protection industry can help and improve, let's talk. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Laura Peterson of Syngenta. And again, to the speakers, I am looking at you when you hit the 3-minute mark, and again, I start gesturing every 30 seconds thereafter, so please stick close. We still have about 14 speakers to go. Thank you.
Syngenta would like to thank EPA and USDA for holding these listening sessions. We are working in 3 key areas: habitat improvement, public-private partnerships for BMPs and education opportunities, and research. We've been working diligently on habitat improvement. We've made a global commitment as part of the Syngenta Good Growth Plan to enhance biodiversity on more than 12 million acres of farmland throughout the world by 2020. And in our Syngenta Operator Pollinator Program, we have supported bee health for more than 10 years by restoring native pollinators on farms and their landscapes by creating essential habitats globally. Syngenta recognizes the importance of public-private partnerships. We've been partnering with Trees Forever in Iowa and Illinois for more than 15 years, planting more than 1.7 million trees and shrubs. This effort includes planting vegetative buffers to reduce runoff and soil erosion, improving soil and water quality, and creating ecosystems that preserve biodiversity. We've done work with SIG grants through CTIC, examining agronomic and environmental benefits of cover crops and how cover crops have positive effects on pollinators. We have a program with the Delta Farm that strives to implement BMPs to conserve, restore, and enhance the environment. We collaborate with the North Carolina Botanical Garden. A key component of this partnership for 10 years is preserving and providing native plants for pollinator habitat. We have a collaboration with Project APHIS-M, whose mission includes funding and directing research to enhance the health and vitality of honeybee colonies and providing forage for honeybees that pollinate almonds. We're also a member of the Honeybee Health Coalition, which has already testified here. BMPs and education opportunities in the area of pollinator health are also crucial. We've got key collaborations, the Guide to Seed Treatment Stewardship, available through the American Seed Trade Association, who's also represented here today, in pollinators and pesticide stewardship, which is from the Center for Urban and Rural Stewardship, and then the Pesticide Environmental Stewardship website that promotes protection. We're working with the North Carolina 4-H to develop a pilot that might be used nationally. When it comes to research, we're aware of the efforts of APHIS and ARS. Syngenta, along with other partners, is collaborating with the Corn Dust Research Consortium, sponsoring multiple research projects in universities to monitor honeybees, foraging during corn planting, and the effectiveness of different dust reduction practices. Together, we're working with Bayer and Valent to co-sponsor reports conducted by Ag Informatics that provides a comprehensive evaluation of the economic and societal benefits of neonicotinoid insecticides in North America. Research on commodity crops such as corn, soybeans, wheat, cotton, sorghum, canola, specialty crops such as citrus, vegetable, and grapes, plus turf, ornamental, and landscape show the neonicotinoids add billions of dollars to the economy and benefit entire communities, not just growers. We have a place to find all this information, the growingmatters.org website. And we ask EPA to review these benefit studies as they look at their scientific data when making recommendations on the use of neonicotinoids. We urge the EPA and USDA to consider the many factors contributing to pollinator health when crafting recommendations to the task force. We thank you for your time and the high level of transparency and participation as we continue to work together.
Thank you, Laura. Next, we have Philip Smith, a commercial beekeeper in Oregon, who I believe is participating through the webinar. So, operator Philip Smith may need assistance unmuting his line.
Philip, please press star 1 on your telephone keypad in order for me to open your line. Again, that's star 1. Your line is open.
Yes. Are you hearing me?
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay, yes. Yeah, I've been a commercial beekeeper out here in Oregon for the past couple of decades here, and kept bees for a long time before that. So my association has been basically with beekeepers. Of all the beekeepers I know, basically we understand that the neonics and other pesticides as well, but particularly the neonics, are the number one problem. Contrary to what Bayer's mantra that was cited last week by the Cropley fellow, that there's three problems: Varroa, and Varroa. Well, as Dave Hackenberg, who was the first one to discover CCD, so aptly said during that session, we've been dealing countrywide with Varroa since the 1980s, and the CCD didn't really manifest until about 2006, and this was just a few years after serious introduction of the neonics in the environment. What I've experienced as a beekeeper in an urban area is, in the past few years, heavy die-off of hives in the urban areas. And this totally coincides with the vast increase of the use of neonic products by homeowners and residents. And one of the fellow people who spoke earlier, I don't know her name, she referred to that. The people throwing this stuff around the environment in the cities they're not licensed at all. It's used at such high doses, and the studies are there showing that bees can die very quickly after exposure. Fellow beekeepers in the urban area have experienced the same. So this is no mystery at all. We do, of course, recognize Varroa as a huge problem. And the interesting thing is, when Bayer speaks of Varroa control, their product Checkmite, which was an organophosphate and started being used widely in the early 2000s by beekeepers, was supposed to replace the fluvalinate, Apistan, because the bees have become more immune to that. Well, how could they not see that the same thing would happen with the Coumaphos, the Checkmite? And of course it did. So this path that is being continued is pure insanity. It's going to lead to total environmental wreckage to which we won't be able to pull out of. And to challenge Dr. Ray McAllister there, the dialogue is civil. That's an excuse that's brought up to just accept their faulty science and say, have a nice day. There needs to be a dialogue, and there needs to be real science, and the science is there, and it proves conclusively that the neonics are devastating bees and others. And so a helpful suggestion is they could go down the route of developing biopesticides and organic approaches. There's big money to be had there, and there's so many now mite controls that are organic acids, the formic, the oxalic, the hop acid, as well as thymol and other miticides that are used very successfully by beekeepers. There's all kinds of money that could be made by companies developing biopesticides that do not harm the environment, do not harm bees. There's no reason not to go down that path other than some need to make massive amounts of money. So let's put the ball in their court. that they do come up with something and begin to focus in that direction, that would be helpful for all of us, the entire environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Next, we have Jim Doan, who is also participating via webinar and may need assistance from the operator to open his line. Thank you.
Jim, please press star 1 on your telephone keypad. One moment. Again, please press star 1. Hey, Jim, your line is open.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay. I found it interesting that in 8 years of beekeepers coming to Washington, D.C., that chemical manufacturers and their lobbyists on last Wednesday said, I only have 3 words to say, varroa, varroa, varroa. Wow, you had a chance to offer solutions but decided to throw mud thinking that was better. You should have come forth and said, we have more effective miticides since mites are the issue, but you didn't. The Bayer Bee Lab could have offered to send tech teams out to investigate why bees are dying, but they didn't. They could have offered to even show commercial beekeepers how to make their bees look better at their bee lab, but they didn't. So instead, I'm here today to take the high road since the gutter is full of the mud they threw last week. Beekeepers must be shown a map of areas that are not highly contaminated with systemic pesticides and fungicides. Research has shown that systemics are an issue to bee health. In order to accomplish this, a nationwide soil and water testing program needs to be established so that beekeepers can make educated decisions as to where to place bees. A program similar in Florida has been done to show beekeepers where you can put bees and receive the least amount of exposure from agrochemicals. It's a good start to better bee health. A hive of bees needs clean water, pollen, and nectar. Second, a nationwide test needs to be done to determine how much of non-beekeeper ag products are in hives and how to reduce those levels to increase hive health. I heard this mentioned last Wednesday by one of the ag representatives to test honey, but it needs to be more broad spectrum. If I am contaminating my hives with chemicals, I want to know. This would help beekeepers on the management side to determine comb rotation. Beeswax is a sponge for everything that a hive makes contact with. This would also help beekeepers and researchers to determine what miticide to not be using to increase hive health. Third, organic miticides need to be registered like oxalic acid. I think beekeepers need more tools to combat mites, although to be honest, since I have moved from an ag area to a non-ag area, we are down to 1 single treatment per year of an organic product to kill mites. Beekeepers around the world use this product safely, except we're not allowed to in the United States. Fourth, the area that are going to be planted for pollinator-friendly seed should be tested to ensure that there is no systemic residues present to actually harm pollinators more than if the ground were left unplanted. We also need to get a few things straight that I think get overlooked here at meetings. A bee is not a hive, but a hive is full of bees. It is made up of different and distinct groups of bees. The hive should be thought of as a human body. If you hurt nurse bees or another group, you kill the hive over time, just as you hurt your liver. Hurting your liver kills a human over time. Just with a hive, it takes less time than a human to expire, but the result is the same, dead. It's time for chemical companies and beekeepers to try to work together. But I guess you in the chemical industry and other ag industries have decided that the roughly 800 beekeepers that control 90% of the bees, based on the estimate by Kim Flottam, that are used for pollinating all the fruit and vegetables in this country, are poor managers of their businesses. So based on the last 8 years, you will ignore my constructive ideas and do what you've been doing, which is nothing, which leads to another year of more dead hives and more meetings that lead to nothing getting better. It is said doing nothing is easier than doing the right thing. Please do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jane DeMarchi from the American Seed Trade Association, who is with us in the room.
Hi, the American Seed Trade Association is pleased to make these comments to the Pollinator Health Task Force. ASTA is one of the oldest trade organizations in the United States. Our broad membership of over 700 companies involved in seed production, plant breeding, and related industries offer varieties from alfalfa to zucchini. Public-private partnerships are essential in order for the task force to fulfill its mandate, and ASTA stands ready to serve as a facilitator. Our diverse membership represents every aspect of the seed industry. Our members produce seeds for both native and non-native plants, wildflowers, and pollinator-friendly packet seeds. Pollinators are an essential production tool for our vegetable seed producers. And lastly, ASTA has implemented voluntary stewardship programs to reduce risk to non-target organisms, including pollinators, from insecticide-treated seeds. Implementation of plans to assist pollinators is challenged by the level of understanding of the many factors impacting pollinator health and the degree to which honeybee and native pollinator health is improving. We urge that all departments and agencies consult with USDA experts to ensure that the strategy is in line with research conducted by the Agricultural Research Service, Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, as well as research funded by the National Institutes for Food and Agriculture regarding pollinator health. ASTA is supportive of the efforts to increase acreage of flowering plants to improve pollinator habitat and forage, as long as programs are economically viable and practical for producers, beekeepers, and all involved stakeholders. Many of our member companies produce pollinator-friendly mixes for a variety of uses. ASTA recommends that experts in the seed industry be consulted on which species should be planted in specific areas to maximize affordability, availability, and plant establishment, which will lead to long-term success. In order to achieve maximum pollinator habitat establishment, multiple actionable pathways should be explored. These include native species only. Others will require a mixture of native and introduced species, and some will rely only on introduced species. There's also a continued role for grass and turf for the benefits that they provide in transportation corridors. I'd also like to add that the task force should consider public-private partnerships for education programs around best management practices. Partnering with CropLife, ASTA and CLA developed a guide to seed treatment stewardship and a companion outreach program to provide farmers and seed treatment applicators with practical solutions to reduce risk to non-target organisms. Seed treatments, including neonic seed treatments, are an important tool for farmers as they allow for the right amount of product to be applied in the right place at the right time for the right pest, decreasing the number of spray applications of agrochemical products. They provide the necessary protection to seeds so plants can have a strong, healthy start. The seed industry is constantly improving processes to improve adhesion of active ingredients to the seed. We've reached thousands of people through our programs, outreach and meetings, through our website, radio and print media, and we'd welcome an opportunity to work with you further.
Thank you. Next, we have Glenn Sims, the Senior Regional Director of the National FFA Foundation, who must be participating via the webinars. So, operator Glenn Sims of the National FFA Foundation may need assistance unmuting his line.
And Glenn, could you please press *1 on your telephone keypad? Your line is open.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay, thank you. The National FFA Foundation is working with several agricultural groups to focus educational efforts around pollinator health issues. Bayer Crop Science is supporting a group of continuing national FFA programs. These programs focus on practical learning opportunities for FFA members in the areas of pollinator health. Bayer Crop Science is supporting individual student grants to support supervised experience programs with an emphasis on pollinator health. In addition, Bayer Crop Science is supporting environmental grants to local FFA chapters to encourage development of community efforts around pollinator health and best practices. The hope is to have grants in urban, suburban areas as well as rural environments. This effort is being supplemented by a group of geographically targeted chapter grants with the same goals. The National FFA Foundation will continue to work with agricultural groups to deliver educational activities around pollinator health. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Sue Anderson of the People and Pollinators Action Network, who I believe is participating via the webinar, and operator may need assistance unmuting.
Okay. I'm going to sit down so I can read my iPad.
So please make sure to keep an eye out at the aisle so I can, thank you.
Will do. My name is Sue Anderson. I'm a Colorado backyard beekeeper and organic gardener. I serve on the board of a new Colorado-based organization, People and Pollinators Action Network, which is focused on safeguarding both human and pollinator health with respect to pesticides and promoting alternative strategies for dealing with the management of pests. There are multiple causes driving the decline of honeybees, native bees, and other pollinators, including habitat loss, parasites, disease, pollution, monoculture agriculture, climate change, and many others. The decline in loss of species isn't restricted to only pollinators. Once common species of other insects, amphibians, birds, and mammals are also disappearing at alarming rates. Conservation scientists have sounded the alarm over and over, and we are not paying enough attention. When neonicotinoid came onto the stage in the 90s, scientists were already concerned about the potential for biodiversity collapse. These pesticides added another serious stress to an already precarious situation. Neonic use has greatly increased over the years, and in recent studies in the U.S. and Europe, surface water samples measured these pesticides at high enough concentrations to kill aquatic invertebrates, the basic building blocks of our food chain. More concerning, the rates of neonics that most countries' regulatory agencies consider protective, in fact, kills many common and important aquatic inverts and leads to degraded water quality. These persistent, highly mobile chemicals are now ubiquitous in our agricultural lands, in our public spaces, in our yards, and in our homes. Whether they're applied by large-scale agricultural systems or by local users in their own backyard, they are having a significant effect. In fact, local and residential use, as another person commented, is as much of a problem because untrained people can purchase these chemicals off the shelf. They're not trained in their use, and some estimates are that residential users are applying at more than 12 times a safe rate. Although the range of issues affecting pollinators takes time and many strategies to address, removing or greatly decreasing the use of neonics and other systemic pesticides is something we can do now. Not only have multiple studies shown that neonics acutely poison pollinators, but many studies also show that sublethal doses of neonics weaken the immune systems of pollinators and can make them more susceptible to parasites and disease. While industry often points to Varroa as the primary issue for bees, it can't be discounted that pesticide exposure may be reducing the bees' ability to deal effectively with Varroa. The use of neonics, particularly seed dressings, disregards the principles of integrated pest management by applying pesticides before pest problems are known to exist. This increases costs, creates resistance in pests, kills and harms beneficial insects, such as pollinators and natural enemies, and leads to secondary pest outbreaks. And most recently, studies have shown that there's little or no evidence that their use increases crop yields. Other countries, particularly in Europe, are paying attention to the scientific data, while the U.S. continues to lag behind. The People and Pollinators Action Network urges the USDA to take some of the following actions. Consider the elimination of the prophylactic use of systemic insecticides as seed dressings and examine the role of all pesticides in the decline of pollinators. Provide incentives for farmers to grow a wider variety of crops and to plant buffer strips of pollinator habitat. In other words, discourage fence-to-fence monoculture and promote pollinator habitat. Provide education about and incentive to farmers with regard to practicing IPM principles. Work with state agricultural agencies to encourage farmers to reduce their reliance on pesticides and provide education for sustainable farming methods that are protective to pollinators and overall biodiversity. And finally, fund rigorous research, such as the recent USGS study in the Midwest that measured neonic concentrations in rivers and streams to determine the extent of neonic contamination throughout the country. Ensure that that research is completely independent and available to the public. These issues are not new. We can deal with them, and we need to deal with them now. Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Roger Williams, who is with us in the room. Again,
And
also
I
folks
promise
in the
I will
room,
not try to sell you a Swifter.
on just a second. Also, for folks in the room, I appreciate that you want to read from an iPad or a computer, but it's helpful if you can occasionally make eye contact. We continue to go over fairly significantly each time. Thank you.
And we were told earlier that we had 5 minutes, and I think that's the issue with the editing because we're editing on the fly. So we'll do our best.
I think very clearly during the slide deck, we asked to keep it to 3 minutes based on the number of speakers who had registered so that everyone would have time to speak. Thank you.
All right. My name is Roger Williams, a resident of Maryland, Central Maryland Beekeepers President, and a beekeeper since 1973. Some quick numbers. 30% hive loss over 10 years. Unsustainable. 387 registered commercial bee operations in the U.S., responsible for pollinating 70 of our major crops. One of these guys goes down, and it affects the tables, pocketbooks, and health of 820,000 Americans. Look at it another way. 2.6 million beehives in this country. That gives each one of us in this room an average total of 400 bees working for your health. That's 3/4 of a cup of bees. We all have our interests in this, and we're seeing it as though we were the blind men and the elephant. Moreover, many with vested interests are blaming factors for which they have no responsibility, shunting the responsibility for the bee loss to others. That won't get us where we're going. We know there are 5 major areas of concern: habitat loss, poor management, new diseases and pests, man-made chemicals and their use, and a limited genetic pool. What are we to do if there's no one factor responsible? Let's take them one by one, if I can, piece by piece. Relative to habitat, encourage farmers to plant required runoff control buffers with pollinator-friendly plants. What would it take to manage the 47,000 miles of the interstate highway system with pollinator-friendly plants and mowing less? What would it take to encourage pollinator-friendly management of the millions of acres of the more than 5,400 general aviation airports in this country? In terms of pesticides, etc., what would it take to make the provisional and licensing period for pesticides shorter to allow a quicker review of information gathered by field experience? In one case, imidacloprid, I believe, we will have waited 25 years for such a review. What would it take to encourage a statistically valid national pesticide use database available for scientific and epidemiological study? When things end up in rivers, bays, metropolitan drinking water, our own tissues, and breast milk, I think it's time to think about that. What would it take for the USDA to put as much effort into testing and encourage organic farming as it does the present chemical farming, thus lowering the total need for pesticides in the first place? In terms of disease and pest control, we need more genetic diversity, testing of bees able to resist varroa mite, and I commend the USDA for its work around the Russian bees. What would it take to have a good, well-funded look at using biologic controls on varroa mites? Leaving varroa control to the well-funded chemical companies alone will get us more chemicals, not biologically maintainable controls. I sincerely hope the testimony here today encourages you who have the power to formulate these questions to do so with a long-term view and demand answers that are beneficial to the bee and the human population alike, and that do not put our overall protection of food supplies and health in the hands of a few. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Wayne Isaiah, who is with us in the room and is a beekeeper and associated with the University of Maryland.
I'm Dr. Wayne Isaiah. I'm a beekeeper in Maryland for 22 years. Past president of the Maryland State Beekeepers Association, and I'm a retired scientist who use remote sensing information and bee data from scale hives to explain the abundance and distribution of bees and nectar. We've established the NASA honeybee net to track nectar flows across the U.S. We've been able to demonstrate that in the eastern U.S., the spring nectar flow has advanced by 70 days, probably due to climate change. But with all that, my opinion is my own, not NASA's. I oppose banning agricultural use of neonicotinoids. The alternatives are worse. We do need improvement in application methods and testing. I urge a ban on the residential and homeowner use of neonicotinoids. Companies should not be allowed to advertise use of these systemics on flowers that pollinators visit. EPA needs to step in there. EPA policy change is probably necessary to regulate the combined use of pesticides and tank mixes with because there are severe synergistic effects, as we saw last winter in California during the almonds. And EPA needs to reconsider sole use of LD50s for colonial organisms like honeybees and many pollinators who have complex behavior patterns. And if you want to make the manufacturer do that, that's fine, but it needs to be peer reviewed. Okay, the major point that I want to make, and I know I'm running out of time, is that in the initiative changing and improving the nutritional status by planting, that's a big problem, and what is proposed will really help. I think nutritional status is a prime contributor to our problems, but EPA needs to help us define what the current nectar flow status is. EPA, nor USGS, nor Fish and Wildlife Service, nor American Beekeepers Federation can tell you when nectar flows occur in various regions of the country. So how are you going to tell if you throw some more plants there that bloom that it does any good? Plants can bloom without producing nectar or useful pollen. So there are efforts to provide such information using new technology, electronic scale hives, etc. We know how to use them, but support at the federal level is needed to make a nice national network, and I encourage EPA to consider that. This is the environment that our pollinators need protection. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Ken Carter, who I believe is also with us in the room.
Hi, my name is Ken Carter. I live in Hyattsville, Maryland, not too far from here. I'm an NRDC supporter, and I'm here because of them, but I'm not a spokesperson for NRDC. Rather, I'm opening a small brewery on Route 1 nearby here that produces honey wine, also known as mead. I'm here because honey is the main ingredient in mead. And I would like to do anything I can to promote the increase in population and health of the bee population in the U.S. More bees pollinating crops and producing honey mean a lower price to honey, and that means more viable small meaderies like mine will be competitive in this business climate. I just returned yesterday from a mead maker's course at UC Davis at the Mondavi Wine Institute and had the opportunity to speak with other meadery owners and beekeepers from around the country. We're all facing similar issues as the price of honey. Thank you. Is that better? We're all facing similar issues as the price of honey continues to increase. In addition, no U.S.-produced honey can be labeled as organic, as neonics and other pesticides have become so prevalent, it's become impossible to ensure that none of it reaches the hives. The honey marked organic that you see in Whole Foods and other stores is actually produced outside the U.S. While I was at UC Davis, I had the opportunity to discuss the neonic issue with the director of the Honeybee and Population Center there, Amita Harris. She's aware that research is ongoing, but she and her colleagues have been observing that neonics, while not killing adult bees, seems to make them more sluggish, and therefore their output, both pollinating crops and producing honey, is diminished. In addition, she'd like to know how neonics affect baby bees and bee larvae. So again, she thinks, in short, there's mounting evidence that sublethal doses of neonics are harmful to bees. Again, I'm not a honeybee expert, but just a small business person who has a vested interest in seeing honeybees thrive in the U.S. And drinking mead has also been known to enhance collaboration. So if the task force would like a few bottles for their meetings, just let me know. Thank you.
Thanks for your generous offer, Ken. Next, I believe we have Cindy and Mona, who are here from the Monarch Tech Network.
I wanted to stand up so you could see my T-shirt because I represent Monarch Teacher Network. I am a teacher and a person who had the distinct pleasure of releasing 5 monarch butterflies, the first annual, at Arlington National Cemetery this year. And my goal, my dream, is to have a butterfly release at the White House next year. It seems to me that Michelle Obama is interested in gardening, and that's my dream. But I just have a few comments. I want to tell you about Monarch Teacher Network. So this goes into the educational part of the outline that you had. Monarch Teacher Network. Hold on. I just wrote these this morning. Monarch Teacher Network is a network of teachers, non-traditional educators, master gardeners, naturalists, park workers, and anyone with a passion for monarch butterflies and its story. We share information and resources with each other through a 2-day workshop. Since its beginning in 2001, Monarch Teacher Network has trained up to 10,000 individuals in 20 states and 6 Canadian provinces. We're really into this. We partner with schools, school systems, university, and park systems. At the end of the 2-day workshop, participants are equipped with materials and knowledge to find eggs and raise monarchs. In February, we encouraged teachers and students to communicate with President Obama, with President Peña Nieto, and Prime Minister Harper as they met in Pueblo, Mexico. We applaud all efforts to inform and activate individuals and groups to revere, respect, and protect this insect and its story. In so doing, we lead participants to consider habitat loss, our farming practices, and consider all pollinators. If you please, even our sustainability. To hold and love and get to know a monarch butterfly is life-changing. We need to have clean and safe habitat for them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cindy. Next, we have Mona Miller, also from the Monarch Teacher Network, I believe.
I have participated in Monarch Teacher Network. I am a naturalist. I have been raising butterflies and moths for about 20 years and participating in the conservation of them. I would like to suggest that the USDA APHIS take monarch butterflies off of their release chart. The new research in the genetics of monarchs, with the release chart, the monarchs are being shipped across state lines all over the United States. The new research states that there are migratory and non-migratory monarchs. So these are being mixed, and I think that this is detrimental to the migration. And I do have something for you on that topic. Also, the research shows that some of the butterfly farmers who are shipping butterflies are shipping butterflies that are diseased. And so this permitting process is allowing the shipment of diseased butterflies also. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Next, we have William Meredith from the Delaware Mosquito Control.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Bill Meredith. I'm the director of the state of Delaware's Mosquito Control Program and also past president of the American Mosquito Control Association. I wasn't planning on offering remarks today, but in driving over from Dover, about 90 minutes of typhoon, and going around tractor trailers, I thought might as well take advantage of the opportunity to contribute something rather than just listen. So I want to share some perspectives from a mosquito control program, and I'll make it specific to my state agency program, although many colleagues around the country, I'm sure, would support what I'm about to say. And I'll focus mainly on the protection of domestic honeybees. Nobody is more interested in maintaining the viability of domestic honeybees for all the good they do than our mosquito control profession. And we know there's the possibility, at least the perception, that if we don't do things right, it could have an impact. What we do in Delaware, and we've been doing this for the past 15 years, is we have a very good communication protocol with our beekeepers. We have 270 registered beekeepers in our little 3-county state. So there's a lot of beekeeping activity. The protocols involve us alerting beekeepers when and where we're working, what we're doing. They can contact us if they got concerns. Then we work with them. Some cases, they may end up closing up a hive temporarily or moving it. But honestly, in the 15 years we've had this protocol, I can think of about a dozen cases where beekeepers have contacted us and said they've got concerns, and we'll work with them. The reason I think we don't have a lot of adverse incidents is due to 2 other factors. One, it's the type of product we use, the rate we use it, and the very small droplet sizes we use. I don't think this has a great impact on bees. If it did, I'm sure we would have heard a lot more over the past 15 years. I've been in this business 35 years total. I can't think of a single bee kill incident in our state attributed to mosquito control applications. Our products are very transient in nature, very ephemeral. More important than that is the timing of our applications. When we use adulticides, they're applied by the ground, primarily at night, very little daytime spraying whatsoever. And when we use adulticides by the air, they're applied typically 1 hour before sunset to no more than 1 hour after sunrise. In fact, the EPA on the adulticide product labels says do not apply these products more than 2 hours before sunset, nor later than 2 hours after sunrise. So it's that window of when we actually work when bees aren't that active. A lot are back in the hives or they're not out in the foraging areas, I think really goes to limit that bad impact. We also practice IPM. We don't prefer to use adulticides. We try to use source reduction techniques, water management, water sanitation, fish stocking. If that doesn't work, we'll go to larvicides to kill the aquatic stages. You don't really have an issue there with bees. It's only when you get into using adulticides, and we try to minimize that. I'm going to end by just saying, please don't think that a way to reduce what is kind of a non-problem to start with would be implementing distance setbacks from how we have to treat. We've got too many beekeepers. We've got too many areas where we have to work. If we had to have distance setbacks like spray no closer than a half mile to a hive, that shuts down our important quality of life function and our important public health function. So don't go that way.
Thank you. Next, we have Steve Tuttle.
Five 500 years ago, this spot where I stand today was as pristine as any national park we have in the country. All I want now is fresh air to breathe, clean water to drink, and a safe food supply. We can live shorter lives with pollution at the levels in China, but why would we want to do that? Today, we are here to discuss how we must immediately ban the use of bee-killing neonicotinoids. In business, the lowest cost product will sell and make someone a lot of money. But what about the negative hidden costs? Will those be factored into the price equation? Who will be stuck with the consequences? The pesticides involved of this newer class of systemic insecticides are absorbed by the plants and transported through the plant's vascular tissue. As stronger pesticides are used in grow the food cheaply, they inevitably will end up inside my body. Doesn't the idea of poisons absorbed into plant tissues scare you? I've heard today that we should work with the chemical manufacturers for a constructive idea. And my constructive idea is to ban these products for 5 years and do research on what's safer. Perhaps I've heard of talk of more organic methods, and we need to work towards that. I'm just one person. I have not supported by making lots of money on selling chemicals. And then we talk about going to a newer class, a more powerful class. Are we going to come up with a more powerful poison to put in the environment? I'm just one person, and I hope you listen to work towards a more organic food supply so that we can all, bees, birds, and us, live together and eat safe food. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Dawn Lothborough of the Autism Policy Reform Coalition, who is with us in the room.
Hello. I'd like to also thank the NRDC for letting me know about this important public listening session. My name is Dawn Lothborough, and I'm here on behalf of the Autism Policy Reform Coalition. We represent over 100,000 families across the nation who are affected by an autism diagnosis and are severely affected children. They're often nonverbal and have medical problems that include immune system and neurological regressions. I'm here today requesting that the EPA and USDA first use the precautionary principle when it comes to use of widespread agricultural pesticides and neonicotinoids that may harm pollinators, affecting the natural food chain that may impact the health and well-being of children. In light of scientific hypotheses examining potential harmful effects of glyphosate on pollinators, on human microbiome, and mitochondrial dysfunction, which is prevalent in the autism community, we request the EPA and USDA take policy actions that are aligned with a commitment to carefully monitor and reduce exposures to potentially harmful substances. Our organization is concerned about the toxic load on potentially susceptible populations. Autism Policy Reform Coalition is supportive of environmental toxicology research for health purposes, in particular for those who may not excrete well and suffer from developmental regression. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Tom Theobald, who is participating online via the webinar, and the operator, Tom, may need assistance unmuting his line.
Tom, please press star 1 on your telephone keypad in order for your line to be open. Tom, your line is open.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
My name is Tom Theobald. I'm a beekeeper in Boulder County, Colorado, and I've been doing this for 39 years. And I would just like to add something to the discussion that seems to be overlooked up to this point. There's been a lot of talk about habitat improvement. There are some fundamental facts that we need to consider if we're going to do any kind of improvement, and that is to assess the level of poisoning that's gone on. There's been a lot of comparison to the neonicotinoids to DDT. In its year of highest usage, which was 1959, 80 million pounds of DDT were applied in the United States. In 2013, 3.5 million pounds of neonicotinoids were applied, and that looks like a dramatic improvement if you subscribe to the poundage illusion. But the fact is that the toxicity of the neonicotinoids are 5 to 10,000 times that of DDT for life forms at the lower end of the food chain, including honeybees. So if you factor in the toxicity, that 3.5 million pounds of neonicotinoids has the toxic equivalent of 20 to 30 billion pounds of DDT. That's being applied to the environment every year. And before we talk about habitat improvement, we need to undertake some orderly assessment of the level of poisoning of both soil and water. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Steve Ellis. The operator, Steve, may need assistance unmuting his line.
I believe I did. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Yes, we can.
Yes, my name is Steve Ellis. I'm a commercial beekeeper. I run about 2,300 hives of bees in Minnesota and California, and I've been at this for about 35 years. For the last 6 years, I've been reporting bee mortality incidents associated with corn planting in my area of the Midwest. And I've become quite familiar with what this neonicotinoid poisoning looks like in a honeybee hive. And I would just like to say that a lot of the poisoning that is occurring is being missed, even by commercial beekeepers, because some of these things that occur when a superorganism like a honeybee is poisoned are not readily noticeable. You'll have queen supersedure, you'll have a depleted population, you'll have impaired queen function, you'll have queen supersedures, you'll have a number of things that will weaken the colony down. And that's a lot of us commercial beekeepers are running into things where we're finding hives that a lot of hives die, but a lot of hives also are compromised to the point where we have to nurse along a lot of really weak hives. And I believe this is directly related to the extreme amount of neonicotinoids being spread throughout the country with seed treatments. And there were statements made earlier that seed treatments are safe for bees because bees aren't exposed to, that the amount goes down by the time the plant flowers to a negligible amount, and our observations have not been that, and the test results have not been that. We have found amounts in the pollen and the nectar of the corn plants that and plants that have been other plants that have been contaminated by the planting of corn, namely willows and dandelions, that have been of extreme concern. In my own case, I've lost 65% of my bees already. I joined a lot of other commercial beekeepers that have had similar massive losses, and we need immediate action on this. And I call on US EPA to act immediately to withdraw the seed treatment of neonicotinoids and provide some immediate relief for a very crisis situation that's going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Don Glenn. And operator Don may need assistance unmuting his line.
Yes, ma'am. Don, your line is open.
Good afternoon. My name is Don Glenn. I'm the chairman of the Production and Stewardship Action Team with the National Corn Growers Association. And I'm also a corn farmer from North Alabama. While corn does not rely on bees and other pollinators, we recognize the importance of pollinators to American agriculture, and we are committed to working with other stakeholders to implement solutions that will improve the health of honeybees and other pollinators. NCGA is a member of the Honeybee Coalition, which we've heard a speaker earlier today from that organization. In the instance of time, I won't repeat their message. NCGA is supportive of efforts to increase habitat and forage for pollinators, but this must be done in a way that is economically viable and practical for farmers. NCGA is a partner in the Guide to Seed Treatment Stewardship Program, educating farmers on the latest in seed treatment and management information. But neonics are an important tool in our toolbox. It is important that farmers retain use of the best available crop protection tools to manage threats to our crops. The use of seed treated with neonics has enabled farmers to significantly reduce the application of alternative insecticides. Corn is normally planted or grown in rows that are 30 inches apart from each other. The seed spacing within those rows are 6 inches apart from each other. The neonic seed treatment forms a barrier around that seed, but the rest of the ground is not treated. We use much lower amounts of this chemistry than we did of previous chemistries, and this reduces our exposure as farmers in the application of these products. The NCGA message to the Pollinator Health Task Force is that it is imperative that any actions taken by the Pollinator Health Task Force must be objective and science-based. As a national organization, we stand ready to partner with the USDA and the EPA to educate our members about ways that they can maintain healthy pollinator populations. Thank you for the opportunity to give you our message.
Thank you, sir. We've reached the end of the list of folks who had requested to speak in advance, and there are a few folks queued up online still, but before we get back to the online queue, if there's anyone in the room attending who has not yet spoken, who would like to speak, we have roughly 6 minutes left, but would like to hear from maybe 2 or 3 folks in the room. Sorry, yeah.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm Dr. Margaret Dwyer. I'm a local educator and resident in the Capital District. I'm here as one of the hundreds of thousands of people who signed on to the NRDC statements about the need to curtail the use of toxic substances in our ecosystems. But I'm also here just as a lay gardener and as a member of the Friendship Community Gardens in Northwest DC, where as a handful of concerned people who love gardens and love the earth, we practice the best principles that we know in terms of pollinator health. We have our own hives of bees. We plant butterfly gardens. We encourage all plot holders to plant native flowering plants within every single plot. And there was a time when our garden was alive with bees and butterflies. And over the years, we have seen such a precipitous decline in this population that it's breathtaking. And what we've come to realize is that as just common gardeners, we aren't enough. Our good practices aren't enough. It's like standing up to a tsunami with a teaspoon. And what we really need is the EPA and the USDA to stand up for us and for the pollinators to make sure that all of us survive. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I believe actually there's someone over here near Steve, who can speak next.
Hi, my name is Anne Francis. I'm the lead botanist at an organization called NatureServe. We are a network representing natural heritage programs in all of the states of the U.S. and provinces in Canada. I also represent a group called the Plant Conservation Alliance. They're a non-federal group. We have over 300 organizations that are committed to plant conservation. So NatureServe is committed to the conservation of native species, regardless of any perceived use to humans. And so while we're all concerned about the health of honeybees and monarch butterflies, it's important to remember that there's a whole host of pollinators and plants that are native to this country, and that should be included and addressed in this task force. I wanted to address one of the things mentioned, which is the need to provide an affordable and pollinator-friendly seed mixes. So the first thing I wanted to say is that the choice of seed matters when we're coming up with these pollinator-friendly seed mixes, and that our recommendation is to use native and ecologically appropriate plant materials. There's already a federal native plant materials development program that's very successful and is an example of something that could be scaled up for the rest of the country. The goal of conserving pollinators is best met by conserving and restoring native and high integrity habitat. So what we want to avoid is farming for wildlife. We don't want to just plant a couple of species of milkweed to bring back the monarch. We want to think about our ecosystem as a whole and restore high integrity habitat. And there's an enormous opportunity to do so in the American West in terms of acreage. There are hundreds of acres that are revegetated or restored with non-native seeds and non-native monocultures still to this day. So there's an enormous opportunity to restore native habitat there. We need more resources from federal agencies and programs, even existing programs, to be directed towards the less charismatic of our fauna and our flora. For example, we need a national monitoring program for pollinators. The USGS would be the perfect agency to do this as the research arm of many of our federal land managing agencies, because we won't know if any of our efforts are effective if we don't monitor them, right? We need to support the National Native Seed Strategy that's forming, and we need to integrate pollinator conservation within some other federal programs that haven't been mentioned within the Fish and Wildlife Services Endangered Species Act, within the Federal Landscape Conservation Cooperatives, and finally, we need to work with state agencies to make sure that we are restoring this high integrity habitat. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we actually already have two folks queued up on the line. We will take one more set of comments from someone in the room. And sorry, Robin, do you mind? And then we will move to the last two folks on the line. And real quickly, for those who I know would like to comment, but we do not have time to hear right now, I encourage you to submit your comments online and in writing, again, through regulations.gov. And the docket number is EPA-HQ-OPP-2014-0806. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm William Dent, Executive Director of Natural Partners. We have two programs that are trying to mobilize the general public getting involved with these issues, particularly that of butterflies and monarch butterflies. One is the Monarch Sister Schools program, which is here in Washington, D.C. and Maryland. And I'd refer you to our website since I want to be very brief. That's www.monarchsisterschools.org. And we've been working with Chesapeake Natives, which is a fantastic source here in Maryland for native plants, the very thing that my predecessor was just speaking about. And they work only with natives to the Chesapeake Bay area, and you should check them out. Their website is chesapeakenatives.org. We have a second program, which the previous one engages school children. We plant habitat gardens, and those gardens are used as an outdoor classroom, making them aware of habitat and all these issues we've been talking about here today. The second program is for the general public. We're working with a total of 9 garden centers in the D.C. metropolitan area, and the website is called the Plant Butterflies. And we have gotten American Plant, Benke's, Good Earth, and one other to offer more native plants. And those participating garden centers have more than doubled their sales of native plants, pushing aside the exotics. So if you want to check out that, look at our site, www.plantbutterflies.org. One of our board members had the idea, well, I've got to plant the plants, but it's really the plants that bring the pollinators back and help support them. Of course, there are many other issues. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a speaker queued up through the webinar, Bill Bond, and operator Bill may need assistance unmuting his line.
If you could please press star 1 on your telephone keypad. And so your line is open.
Okay, can you hear me, please?
Yes, sir.
This is Bill Bond. I'm Executive Director of the Minnesota Crop Production Association in Minnesota. I offered testimony, a public testimony that was delivered to the Minnesota Senate related to the MDA, the Minnesota Department of Ag's information regarding inspections involving potential bee losses due to pesticides. And contrary to what Steve Ellis has testified, in 2009, there was one request to the MDA for an inspection and no detection of a pesticide was found. In 2010, there were 0 requests. In 2011, there was one request for an MDA inspection, again, no detection of pesticides found, and that was the same for 2012. In 2013, there were 6 requests for inspection. 5 of those did have a detection of a pesticide. However, interestingly enough, 3 of those were in Minneapolis. And there were 3 bee kills, all within a mile of each other. And after the investigation, they found that a pesticide called propanol was involved. And of course, that's a pesticide used by the pest control industry and in fact is available to the general public and often is used in buildings as a structural pest control. There were the point is that the 2 other commercial beekeepers that had made statements and made requests for inspection, there were none that were related to pesticides in the rural areas. So we're fascinated by the claims about massive losses. We just don't see it in the facts. And this was testified before a Senate committee, and in fact, the Department of Agriculture was there, and the spokesperson agreed with me on those facts. There is an opportunity for a public-private partnership, and that is DriftWatch. DriftWatch is a industry-developed, geospatial-oriented map that allows folks that have sensitive crops and sensitive insects to pesticides to post their location so that there can be cooperation between pesticide applicators and the sensitive crops and insects. And in this case, interestingly enough, the beekeepers in Minnesota, at the request of the beekeepers, the Department of Ag stopped keeping track of the bees and their locations in Minnesota. We did request in a public hearing last year that the department encourage the beekeepers, in fact, require the beekeepers to once again register at no cost to themselves where their beehives are located so that during spring, at those times of the year, we could identify them. We are interested in that kind of public-private partnership in Minnesota. Most beekeepers, most farmers work very well together. There are very little difficulties, and I think you should realize that and take that into account as you're making decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next and our last speaker is Mr. Daniel Fay, who is also participating through the webinar, and operator, he may need assistance unmuting his line.
One moment. Just press star one in order for me to unmute your line.
My name is Daniel Fay, speaking on behalf of Valent USA Corporation, which is a registrant in the crop protection industry. Valent USA is contributing directly to the body of knowledge that will help the EPA and USDA make smart, science-based decisions that will support the continued coexistence of managed and native pollinators with production agriculture needed to feed the world, and with management of healthy urban landscapes. Neonicotinoids provide real value to real people, communities, and the environment, as elaborated by the ag informatics studies mentioned earlier. We support the federal government's efforts to support pollinator health through additional research, public education, stakeholder communication, and public-private partnerships. Regarding pesticide use, we urge the government to stay the course with its reevaluation of neonicotinoids and evaluate the extensive body of information being developed by the crop protection industry and independent scientists, including the ag informatics reports published at growingmatters.org. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for participating both in person here in Riverdale and online through the webinar. Again, for folks who participated, even if you spoke today, we encourage you, for last week on November 12th, we encourage you to submit your comments online by November 24th through the open EPA docket. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This concludes today's conference call. You may now disconnect.